issue. I'm delighted that you could take a bit of time in your day to have this conversation about a topic near and dear to many of us around patient education. My disclosures just get us going that I have served on a few advisory boards around clinical trial evaluations. I hold some research funding from peer-reviewed agencies in Canada, and I do have this chair that's funded through our hospital foundation as well. The objectives for the next 45 minutes or so is to remind us about the importance of health education in our cardiac rehab programs. And just as one example, probably of many that all of you folks are using, as well as programs that are available across the AACVPR network, I'd like to share some resources from our own program that is available at the website shown on the screen, cardiaccollege.ca. And again, I present it as just a model of things that we have done, things that we've been able to pull together, and that we're happy to share as well. And then describe a little bit about how we've conducted some evaluation around patient education using our materials as well as others to get us in the frame of mind that education is not only a nice thing to do, but it's a must thing to do that actually affects our long-term trajectories with our patient. And then the very interesting thing that we've been engaging in with many programs across the US as well as internationally in other sites has been around how do we implement some of these patient education programs that suit your own local environments. I wish my camera was functional and I can actually show you who I am, as well as I wish it was functional on your end so I could see who you all are. This is much better together, and I'm reminded that we were going to do this together back in March. Yours was going to be the last trip that I was going to take pre-pandemic, but then I guess all of us recall back in March of how the lockdowns happened and travel bans occurred, and one day we'll be able to see each other again in person, and I'll certainly look forward to that. But here's some visuals of where we're at on the other side of the Great Lakes, on the northwest part of Lake Ontario. This is our program that's across two sites at Toronto Rehab and the Peter Munk Cardiac Center. Our university, our hospital conglomerate is called the University Health Network. In pre-COVID times, we would see about 2,400 patients per year. They attended a 4 to 6 month program. Our design was a little bit different than some of the typical models across the US. So we would run weekly visits over the 6 months as opposed to multiple visits for a week over a shorter period of time. And over the course of a year, we would typically see about 45,000 visits and about 4,500 on-site cardiopulmonary tests as well for the program. And here you can see some shots of a gym space. We have an outdoor track and an indoor track with equipment-based modality. Over here on the right-hand side is where we would have a telemetry room as an example. So that's our kind of sandbox that we're playing with. And common to our program, as it is for your programs and across the national organizations in America or Britain or in Canada, that we all feel that patient education is indeed a global standard in how we should run our programs. And this stylized program elements from the British Association I like to call out because it really puts health behavior change and education right in the middle as we achieve important changes around risk factors, lifestyle factors, psychosocial health, building towards long-term health maintenance strategies. And I think we see ourselves in all of this as well. But for this conversation today, we're going to focus on how education can be really critical to health behavior change, with the proviso that we think kind of carefully about how we design, deliver, implement, and evaluate those educational processes. If we were in the same room together, I would love to do this exercise with you and just ask for a show of hands, or ask you to stand up as we call out your education role, because we're all involved in education to greater or lesser degrees, but we all do touch upon education. And some of us may on the call may be actually ones that design educational curriculum, which is terrific. And some of us will actually develop some of these materials. Many of us will actually deliver the materials together, and a few of us may actually be evaluating these products, and all of us, I think, are involved in patient care to some extent. And perhaps maybe not in this meeting, but at others, there's often a patient partner also on the call. And this is to call out that we all have a role to play. And if I asked you, well, should we assemble a team together to actually build a new curriculum for cardiac rehabilitation or pulmonary rehabilitation, I think we would say, well, we need all of these kinds of roles represented at the table, ideally. But sometimes, I guess if we reflect on how we might in reality develop education, it might fall to one of us at the corner of our desk, maybe late at night, putting together a PowerPoint deck. And while that can be extremely effective and very well informed, if we had the opportunity to actually engage more widely as we put these things together, then that might develop even a more persuasive kind of presentation, educational session, interactive learning kind of design. But I did want to call out that we are all definitely in this together, which is very exciting. I think we also all recognize the importance of patient education. And, you know, for those of you who do this for a living, let me just call out that, you know, you are doing really critically important work because the literature has a lot of studies in it. Now, we'll talk about it a little bit in coming slides, but there is a very strong relationship between disease knowledge, what we know, and clinical outcomes, what happens down the road, and how we behave in between. Because if education, when it's done right, can actually lead to improved knowledge, behavior change, and better health, and ideally we would actually evaluate all of these domains along the way. You know, think of all your kids that are doing online schooling right now, and think if we're actually doing this in the most ideal circumstances possible as we respond to things like pandemic. This was an article that our group published a few years ago about just reviewing patient education in the cardiac arena, and to kind of highlight that there actually are a number of studies, and in this case, there were about 50 studies that were available that spoke specifically around patient education. And you can see that there's a number of studies, for instance, that would speak to physical activity. So let's educate about physical activity, and about 20 out of 26 would say that education can lead to improvements in physical activity. Similar proportion for food intake, similar in smoking cessation. A few will speak to other aspects of patient education, like medication adherence, which of course is one of the pillars of what we offer in cardiovascular and pulmonary rehabilitation. But very few studies have actually evaluated this systematically, but yet we would all agree that education about medication is actually important. Responding to symptoms and psychosocial well-being, important domains, room to move on. But all of this to say that there is an evidence base that supports that patient education can be a powerful tool in our hands. We would say, though, that, you know, again, if we want to design an education program from the ground up, we might take an interesting approach to this and do it systematically. You know, it's probably more thoughtful than the approaches from the past, and I have certainly engaged in sessions where I say, okay, let's educate the patients about cholesterol or whatever, and I'll just pull together a slide deck and go ahead. But if we really want to be thoughtful about this slide presents kind of a framework where we might go through this in kind of a purposeful manner, where we'll identify a problem, think about a theoretical framework to deliver education. And I think for the educational purists on this call, you recognize that there isn't these pedagogy around educational intervention. Let's ask people what they actually want to know and how they want to know it, and then based upon those needs, develop some goals for the program. If someone says, I really want to learn how to exercise safely without getting angina, let's make that a goal and design the educational intervention specifically around addressing that goal. Thinking about sequencing, you know, in the course of a rehab program that goes over weeks or months, which things should we prioritize first? Let's ask the patients what they want to know at what time. And I think we've all had that experience where sometimes if we load things all at the beginning, some of those things get lost. And it's not only, and it only comes up weeks or months later that someone actually is interested in a topic that we seem to have covered before. Think about instructional strategy and design based upon how people like to learn in terms of methods and materials. No single thing will be the answer for everybody, but it's interesting that we often might kind of come back to this common denominator of PowerPoint answers all things for all people. And indeed, sometimes we've been guilty of just handing out PowerPoint slides to our patients. And while it's a great potential tool as a discussion guide, it's pretty hard to learn from a PowerPoint slide without all of the context. Very important to evaluate what we've done, right? So that's only the only way we'll know if the stuff we're doing is actually effective, and feed that back into going around to number 1 and 2 and 3, etc. again, so that this is a dynamic process ideally. So, you know, on the left-hand lower part of this slide is a framework that we used in some of our design and evaluation of thinking about where education actually fits into a whole behavior change framework, because that's the tenet of cardiac rehab: help people recover well, move more, eat better, manage psychosocial health, take medications, all of those sorts of things. And behavior change, I think we all agree, is pretty tough. This, called the health action process approach, is one of several models that looks at how do we move from things like expecting outcomes and self-efficacy, developing intention to change, to actually going to action to affect a behavior. And we looked at specifically how education might impact, for instance, on self-efficacy or forming intentions to do something differently. And that was a really thoughtful, sounds like a kind of an academic egghead sort of thing, but it's good to know where our education is actually impacting. So purpose is kind of an important aspect of what we do. And then think about understanding.
You feeling okay?
Sometimes we just may jump in again to delivering sessions without fully appreciating, for instance, where our people are coming from. What kind of learner are they? What's going around with their own health literacy, which is really important. Can they learn the things that you are trying to convey? Understanding what it is that they want to know, and then really reassessing this. So designing with understanding is really important. Designing with partners, critically important. And we deliberately went through some of these steps, and I'm sure you have as well, in designing your materials, working with patient partners specifically on content, on review, on language checks, on sequencing, on instruction, all of those things, very worthwhile, so that we can actually get to products and modalities that actually might be more engaging. That is kind of the theoretical background and a journey that took us about 5 years that led us to build these kinds of materials. And this is a slide that conveys to you a web platform that our program developed together with patients and partners that we use in our cardiac rehabilitation program, as well as another stream for diabetes rehab. We called the first product within this web platform the Cardiac College. And then developed another college called Diabetes College, and are developing further things. And if we think of the university concept with an overarching university with a bunch of colleges or schools underneath it, that's what this emulates. So the parent site is called Health E University, a deliberate play on words, and within that is the Cardiac College and the Diabetes College. And these are freely accessible to anybody around the world. You'll see here there's a language selector here for English, and I'll come back to that a little bit later, that, because it's kind of an active button, there must be some other languages as well. So again, what we learned from the theoretical framework is that we want to position the content in meaningful packages. And we came up with 5 program pillars along with kind of our partners and patients together, that ultimately we felt that the goal of our cardiovascular rehab programs were to help people take control of their own health. And the educational components would go around the wheel as so that it's great to help people understand and treat their own conditions. What is heart disease? What is a surgery? What is angioplasty, etc. Help people get active, eat healthy, feel well, and ultimately take control. So, those 5 program pillars are very purposeful. There's color coding on all of these stuff that actually carries through in subsequent materials, whether it's on the web or in print, that there's a real purposeful design in all of this. So anything that's green labeled is around exercise, yellow is food, etc. So that's something to watch for as you go through this as well. This would be the landing page of Cardiac College that then takes you through those 5 different pillars across here: treat, heart disease, get active, eat healthy, feel well, take control. There's something else called Thrive, which we'll talk about later, which is a structured way of getting all of this stuff. And down in the lower midsection of this slide, you'll see that there's a guide here. And this is the product, I guess, the textbook of cardiac rehabilitation for patients who go through our program, as well as for many others. So some of our patients still like to get the textbook. And if you want a 250-page book about how to get healthy, then it's available there for patients on our site. Or who attend our program in person. They can actually purchase one of these books for about $30 because they like to have print material. And I'll show you a little bit more what that looks like in a moment. But for those who are more electronically minded, you can simply view the guide online or download it to whatever tablet or e-reader that you have, and it's all available at no charge for you. All of the material that's in the book is actually represented on the web as well, divided into these components. So depending if you're a visual learner and you like to click through web pages in a less structured format, or if you like a book and go through that chapter by chapter, then it is available to you. Within the cardiac guide, the first versions of this was a 250-page book, and you could still put it all together. But what we heard from some of our patient users was it would be nicer if you actually divided it into smaller compartments. So we took the big book and made it into 9 different chapters that have that same color coding. Blue is for understanding your disease, green is for exercise, yellow is for food, purple is for psychosocial health. So they're now in 20 to 50-page chapter books. And you'll see that certainly in the electronic formats, and if you want to pay extra for printing, it's got some very nice color and nice illustrations that go along with it as well. And you can see that these are very relevant topics. Again, freely available to everybody and anybody. The next kind of challenge that we undertook was thinking about the diversity in our communities. And I'm sure in many of the programs that you work in, people come from all over. Toronto boasts that it's one of the most diverse cities on the planet. There's about 125 different languages that are spoken in Toronto, and in major U.S. cities that we see a similar kind of distribution of people living and thriving, but also experiencing heart events. So people from different places and speaking different languages and of different culture will also appear in your rehabilitation programs. So we saw this as a need and opportunity within our program as well. For people attending our on-site programs, it has been our routine over the last several years to actually have one or more translators actually in the room with patients wearing handsets. It's like going to the tours in Europe where you've got your earpieces and someone's talking to you in a different language. That's how we run our programs. And then to develop the multilingual resources, we also undertook a series of translations and adaptations to serve populations in our programs, but also to serve populations in partner programs elsewhere. I'll show you a slide about international collaborations in a little while, but this gives you a smattering of the early language translations that we've undertaken. You know, Canada is officially a bilingual country where we have English and French spoken. It's very regional, but some of our partners are using the French guides in the province of Quebec and New Brunswick, for instance. We have some Spanish-speaking patients in our program, and also a number of Spanish-speaking partners. So these materials are used in Mexico and Costa Rica and Peru and Colombia, and we've just done an adaptation in European version of Spanish to use in Spain. A Portuguese translation was undertaken for partners in Brazil, and a European adaptation for Portugal. There is a large South Asian community in the Toronto region and surrounding. So we've done a Punjabi and Hindi translation. India is a complex place with many languages, but those were the first two that were felt to be quite relevant. We've embarked on a Chinese language translation as well for Mandarin and Cantonese speakers. And obviously there is no end to this work that can be done. But right now on the website, you can access all of these things if you have people that, patients that might be needing of any of these languages. The Arabic translation will be going up very shortly as well. And these are snapshots of some of our fun international collaborations where, you know, in Costa Rica, they actually helped us with the Spanish translations. We're very proud to be able to print these materials out for their own patients. This is an example in Peru of the materials that they used from that Spanish adaptation. My colleague shown in the middle here, Dr. Ross, regularly goes to Nepal to do mountain climbing and mountain medicine, and she took a crate full of the books to share with medical colleagues at one of the universities in Nepal, where they've got a very fledgling cardiac rehab program. These were the very first graduates in the upper right of the Portuguese version of the cardiac college that was run in a fair-sized city in Brazil. Middle and lower right are examples of our French-speaking patients in Canada that use the French adaptation. So these have been very kind of rewarding sorts of collaborative efforts in taking our materials and moving them forward. So that's the diversity part. The other part, so we describe the college as multimodal, multilingual, multimedia, and we recognize that people, again, learn very differently. So as we continue to add components to the program, we've been doing things like this, you know, nutrition. You know, it's okay to read about it, but ideally you like to see stuff. And one thing that we added last year was a whole Choosing Healthy Foods video series. So the topics are shown here. Each of them has a 2-minute video that's obviously patient friendly. And the idea was that if your patient is going to the grocery store and they need to buy bread or cereal or nuts or oil, then this would be something helpful to them because they can actually have a guided journey, so to speak, with information from our dietitian team about how to choose a healthy bread in 2 minutes or less. And then they can actually download a tip card as well about what are the elements that would actually make a bread healthy. So if you click on this, all of these videos are actually on YouTube. Collectively, they've been viewed reasonably highly. There's probably 100,000 views collectively of these videos. And then this would be the tip card that they could download that would help direct them through how do you read a food label and see how much salt is there in this bread? Is this actually a high fiber bread or not? And how do I make the best choice out of this? So that would be a nice adjunct to the nutritional information that's out there. And there's also, this is an example of an interactive thing that they can do on the website as well. One of the patterns of eating that we promote in our program, and I'm sure that you would do something similar, whether it's AHA, step diets, or Ornish styles of diet, or in this case, the Mediterranean pattern of eating, that folks can actually do an online questionnaire about how closely does their pattern of eating match a Mediterranean pattern of eating that has been shown to actually reduce cardiovascular events over the long term, such as in the PREDIMED study. So you could see here, you can answer 13 questions about the kinds of oils that you eat. Do you have enough fruits and vegetables? What kind of animal proteins are you using? Do you have a lot of sugar and sweets in your diet? And then, if you score 7 or more, then you're doing pretty well on the Mediterranean plan. If you score less than that, then there's room to grow, and you'll get some hints on what are the areas that you can actually move upon. So you can download a paper version of this, or you can actually complete it online. And we've actually integrated a version of this into kind of standard questionnaires that we offer up in our program. So that's another thing that one can do kind of in the educational sphere. Exercise, of course, is critically important for all of our programs, and we've taken the regular instruction that we would offer around things like fit principles, warm up, cool down, stretching, etc., and put that into the written book, the electronic book, and also on the web. And we've also done things like created a whole video series on how you would do the resistance training program that we offer up in our program, just as an example. So each of these is a very nicely created, very clean, nicely illustrated 2-minute video on how you do things like bicep curls or external rotation with a band, etc. And again, YouTube videos about all of this stuff. And you can pick a playlist that your clients can watch at home and follow along to do their upper body, lower body, core circuit, and that'll take them 20 or 30 minutes to get through all of that, which is very nice. The models for this program are actually folks working in our program, so we're pretty sure that the techniques that are being shown would meet best practice standards as we walk through. So those are things that we've developed thus far, and there's ongoing evolution of more things that we can add to it. In the time of pandemic, there's we used to do, or we have been doing, kind of daily 1-hour webinars for our patients, and about the heart healthy topics around food and exercise, psychosocial health, etc. So all of those things are also archived onto the web platform as well, if you want a longer conversation about any one of these topics. And then, recognizing that people learn differently. So here's another way that people can learn differently, is that you can take all of those materials and package them together differently. And we call this program Thrive, Targeted Health Risk Interventions, into a 12-week format. And you can see it's got its own little tagline of small changes for better health. The idea is that you could follow a 12-week program that starts with creating a plan for change, ends with choosing health every day for the long term, and in between, people can choose their journey of whether they want to do the green exercise modules, the yellow food modules, the blue taking your medicine module around heart health, or the purple ones around psychosocial health. And each week you'll do something different in terms of an interactive activity that I'll show you one second. I'm going to call out proudly that this was awarded one of these digital awards for design and implementation at the AVA Digital Awards a few years ago. Don't push me on what that actually means, but we're proud to say that it's actually award-winning. So when we offer this to people, and I'll come back to this as a structured model for delivering education potentially, but we describe it as a choose your own weekly adventure. And within each week, you will, for instance, starting an exercise program, you'll watch a 3 or 4 minute video, nicely animated, to talk about what is aerobic exercise. Then take you through a planning exercise and setting some goals, actually doing the program for the next several days, asking you to reflect, and then come back and then start the next module. So it's very purposeful and matches our whole motivational kind of construct for running our programs. Okay, so lots of resources that are available. If you want to package this together, how might you do this? And we've been having a whole bunch of conversations with different programs on how you can actually take these materials and put them together. So if you're doing kind of on-site learning and have a small classroom experience, for instance, then what we've done is developed 18 PowerPoint sessions that are aligned with all of these materials and with a lesson, with an education guide to take you through structured topics. I'll take you through a curriculum in a second. But in this kind of educational toolkit, there'll be lesson plans, slide decks that can be customized, and connections to videos, a facilitator's guide with this, and the assurance that we've done all of this stuff with smart adult education principles, and all the materials will be quite friendly to learners based upon all of those principles that we articulated at the beginning of this session. And call outs to designs that as opposed to very dense content in PowerPoint, what we've done is ask people to read the background materials, and when we come together, then it's more about reflecting on how we should do some action planning, learning something with a self-management action, trying to build in something that's relevant, and what is the hook and why should I listen to this session? Why is it relevant? And then calling out to some resources. And as an example, we'll take you through, this is the weekly slide kit or toolkit that's called Treating Heart Disease. The objectives for the week are, let's learn how your heart works and address some commonly asked questions. Let's also talk about taking your medications reasonably and knowing your risk factors. So the design of the slide kit will be a nice title slide, and they'll look like this with the right kind of color coding. Blue is for how your heart works and disease. There'll be some nice graphics. There's our logo. You can add your own logo to this as well. There's a smart statement about objectives that are very clear, very straight up. How your heart works, where to find some more information, and how to ask your doctor questions about your heart, for instance. Within each of the toolkits, there'll be something like this, where there is a very nice graphic that's clearly presented with some very simple language. So not too complex, and again, our in-house patient education design people help with this stuff. There's also within this a story that we'd like to share, and hopefully people can see someone like me. And you can switch this out to match your appropriate demographics in your community. But the story is about someone who is participating in cardiac rehab, who's going to see her physician. Let's help her get ready to ask questions about her heart. So that's the kind of examples of programs, and the specific action might call us out to something like this. This is the AHA tool on how to prepare for your doctor's visit, and the action that we can take together as a group, whether it's on site or online, is to kind of work through this template. So that would be purposeful education on managing your own heart disease better. And then there'll be a link out to, if you want to know more, go to the website for those of you who have computers and internet, and look at this section about what is heart disease. And if you had an angioplasty, then there'll be some illustration or a link to a video. Or if you've got the print books, read this chapter and look at this part. So that's how the education design works. So for some reflection and hopefully some discussion that you'll want to ask about, think about your own program model. What does it look like? Is it 3 times a week for 12 weeks or once a week for 6 months? How do you deliver education in your program? Is it done all front loaded and we have education day at the beginning and can share a lot of information in that, one session? or is it like a 5-minute tack on to exercise? Or do we run open gyms where people just come and go? Maybe I can put things on the television. Or is this really all about self-study and I can assign a curriculum and just do check-ins? And then, here are some resources that we're sharing today from the college about the guide, the web, the slide decks, lesson plans, Thrive programs, video resources, and self-study using all of these things. And I'm sure you've got lots of other materials that you've developed or that you've subscribed to or that you've borrowed from other programs, and you can put it all together to develop a really kind of impactful kinds of programs. If you're starting over, or if you wanted to kind of think and reflect upon what you're doing, here might be 4 ideas, and these are kind of 4 models that we share with other programs when we actually have a chat about kind of here's how education might be designed using some of the materials that we have. And I'll share with you these 4. If you're doing a classroom style program that goes over many weeks, here's how you can do it. If you have the 12-week Thrive, create your own journey kind of program, right now, this is where we're at as a program right now in terms of the 16-week hybrid, and then there might be something do it yourself. And we're gonna explode those over the next couple minutes, and then we'll get to some questions. So for our pre-COVID on-site education classroom, this is sort of what we did. With our groups. In the old days, if I can say that, we used to have like 25 people clustered together in the same room. That sounds horrifying, doesn't it? And we would take them through a curriculum that looked like this, and therefore had all of the slide decks created that matched this kind of 18-week sort of program. So this would be well suited for those of you who have this kind of longitudinal program. Quite comprehensive. Each of these sessions could be 20 or 30 minutes together. And again, there's slide decks that are available for all of this stuff, as well as reading materials that are attached to the guidebooks that we previewed a little bit. So there's lots of homework on the part of the clients, and your goal as a rehab manager would be to review the materials and really focus on action items out of that. Another one would be, look, we do 12-week program. We really don't have a lot of time for formal education, but of course we want to promote this. Then it might be, let's just think about the Thrive model, and each week we can assign this as homework because they are actually pretty well contained. Go to the website, click on create a plan for change, do the learn, plan, do, reflect cycle, and then really the goal will be for 5 minutes at each week, at each touch point on site, just say, how did that go? What did you learn? Are you doing something different as a result of that? And then are you ready to move on to the next session? So that would be a kind of a nice way of doing self-guided study amongst a 12-week structured program where you may not do a lot of formal group education. This is a slide that demonstrates what we are right now doing in COVID. And I know each of our programs probably adapted in very interesting ways over the course of the last several months. We shifted in early March from predominantly on-site program to completely virtual, telephone-based, email-based, one-on-one contacts. We recognized that we had some flexibility to do that with our funders, and that's okay on our side of the border. And then as things kind of quieted down from a COVID perspective, we were able to bring some people on site, but we were still planning on doing a lot of things virtually. So basically we have a largely hybrid program now where 25% of the contacts are on site, but 75% of the program is delivered virtually. And we connect with patients in small groups using a web platform, Microsoft Teams, and all of that stuff has been sanctioned by the hospital. So the educational program you'll see is laid out for people that actually have virtual contact abilities with computer or telephone. We take them through orientation and weeks out to number 16. We're leveraging the Thrive video series as something we'll share together when we're on the Microsoft Teams call for 1 hour, and then really focus a lot on problem solving and how the education programs and the exercise programs are going. But you can see that there is a steady progressive program over the course of 16 weeks. We'll augment this with kind of separate online sessions in larger groups with our psychologists or dietitian or our physicians. Within any 1 week of these 16 weeks, this is how a 1 week session might break out. So on a 1 hour Microsoft Teams call, we'll have 5 minutes for intro, 20 minutes for case management, go around and check in with everybody how things are going with exercise, deliver the 10-minute structured education, which is typically a Thrive video, do some goal setting, action planning, go around with 6 people again, answer some questions, and then do the next week ahead. So that's a kind of a tight program that seems to be working out pretty well. We've gotten our first cohorts through 16 weeks, and now we're into kind of next cohorts doing this, and we're enrolling about 30 new people into this model of programming going forward. I'd love to hear what you guys are doing as well in this time, and we've developed patient kind of manuals on how to run this kind of virtual model, 16-week model. And there's also a staff program manual as well on how to do this. So at each week, what are you doing? What resources are you directing people to along the way? So that's a lot of stuff. That's a lot of stuff that we've done. And of course, there's the opportunity to kind of pick and choose topics and formats in whatever way works for you. We have undertaken some evaluations, as I've alluded to. What I like to say is that we describe this program as an evidence-based one. That is, we can design, deliver, implement, but we also then evaluate to show that it actually makes a difference. And we've done this in many cohorts in Canada and around the world in English and in other languages. And we're able to show that indeed people learn something, which is really good, because that's the most proximal outcome from actually delivering education. We have specific knowledge tools to do that. And we can look at food patterns. People actually change how they eat. They get more active as evidenced by steps per day. And things like their constructs of self-efficacy will also improve along the way as well. So we're kind of jazzed about kind of continuing this work, but we continue the evaluation along the way. And then this will be my last kind of slide to share that says we've been doing this for the last few years. We have partnerships around the country, around the world. Your name can go here. That green arrow points at least somewhere close to Illinois, if I understand my geography. So here's the summary that we hopefully we've conveyed that health literacy and education are indeed very important. We collectively have lots of materials that we can draw from. And again, I'm only presenting the stuff that we've done as an example of materials that are available. I like what we've done. We've worked hard on what we've done. We spent a lot of money on what we've done. But the purpose of it is that we actually just want to share this stuff to as many people as we can. We've taken the steps to also evaluate, and that's showing some very promising results. And maybe if somebody is really motivated on this call, you'll say, yes, I want to pick this up. And yes, I actually want to do an evaluation project in our jurisdiction or program. And we can work with you on that, because there are lots of options. All right, I'm stopping there. I've talked a long time, but I hope we still have a few minutes for questions, and hopefully somebody will want to raise something.
All right, thank you, Dr. Rowe. Open it up to people for via the written chat if you want to write down a question, and we'll try to get to if we can. A couple that we have already is, are there high-risk patient populations that you would not immediately recommend using this website independently?
Not really. I think knowledge should be democratized and be made available to everybody. More information, better. So I don't think of people that can't use the information. Perhaps if I extend that question of, are there people that you may not want to manage completely remotely with just education and nothing else? Then I think we'd probably have a shared conversation about that. That there are certainly people that would do better with at least some degree of supervision that's closer as opposed to completely independent, and those people may be clinically complex, ischemia, heart failure, arrhythmia, etc., or they may be behaviorally complex where it just might be very challenging for them to navigate all of this stuff. But having education available in multiple formats at levels of literacy that people can actually use, I think is probably a good thing for almost everyone.
All right, thank you. Another one we have is, again, you probably touched on this a little bit, but how often is the material updated to include new drugs, and or is it just medications used in Canada?
Yeah. So that's a great question. Updating is an ongoing process for sure. Things like medication, I would agree with you, as new stuff comes out, and that could be every few months. We're not going to update everything at that time, but we do commit to annual updates, and we may have to do things like look to the embedded webinars to talk about novel therapies, like the role of low-dose anticoagulants for prevention, or if lipid guidelines change. For the vast majority of medications, things are very similar between the US and Canada in terms of availability and approvals of medications. Sometimes the names are a little bit different for brand names, but we rely on generic names for the vast majority of things. Cost is sometimes an issue, and pricing of drugs is different on either side of the border. But I think from the medical perspectives around medications, things are pretty common in our jurisdictions.
All right, great. Next question we have is, what about looking at an app version?
An app version, APP version?
Yep.
Yeah, so great idea, and that's certainly on our developmental runway. Coincidentally, we've been submitting grants to develop apps. Finished off a grant last night that looks to integrate this material into an app. Our colleagues from our sponsor might be able to share some information with you as an example of a home-based application where some of these materials have also been integrated. So it's a great idea as one of the other formats where education can be delivered differently, and it can be done in different ways. So an app may just say, go to the website and look at this chapter, but other ways of changing the information would be like, here's the equivalent of a tweet of the day or tweet of the month. Tweets, I think, can be used for good and can be helpful in the education sphere. But I think we would all recognize that to format that information into very short packets of information is helpful. It's different than what might be available currently on the web, but we've also been working on that as an intervention pathway. So package information differently, deliver it differently, but to answer the question directly, we don't have a cardiac college app yet, but stay tuned.
Great. And final question we have is actually one I have is, we have some doctors who say, virtually or online, that our patients don't know how to use it, the technology, so we're not going to bother doing it. What's your answer to those discrepancies, or people not wanting to go that route because people have a hard time with technology.
Yes, so I think we've all been facing this for the last number of months, for us included, right? One, very important to figure out what is it that people have and what they can use. So critically important to answer that question. Absolutely. Can't use web-based things for people that don't have computers. So absolutely. But I think the majority of people probably do have access, and probably surveys on both sides of the border would suggest that as many as 70% of cardiac patients have smartphones, tablets, computers. So these kinds of materials are relevant for many people. But for the folks that don't, then think about modalities of education that can still be helpful. And that's why I think having a menu is really important. For our clients, some people like printed books still, so we can't throw those out yet. Those can still be very helpful to people that don't have access to electronic means. But I think all of it together, I hope the question is not indicating don't do education because people can't access the web, but rather absolutely match the modality to the abilities, comforts, and technological capabilities of patients. But for everybody, they all deserve the opportunity to learn and to grow and to thrive. And we can all come up with materials that will suit that.
All right, great, thanks. I'll just switch this over real quick. And everybody hold the, here we go. Okay. All right. So again, just a thank to our sponsor, Moving Analytics. Again, thank you so much for your support for this online event. And if you, again, CEU info, here's our SurveyMonkey website or web address. Please go to the web address and fill out event evaluation. Make sure you put your name and email at the end of the evaluation on SurveyMonkey so we can send that certificate via the email that you registered with or that you put onto the evaluation. Also, please fill out evaluation by December 15th. That way we can make sure we get everything out to everybody and we're not lagging in coming new year. And then we can start working on possibly sending out some other, like possibly access to the video, if not other accesses. And again, Dr. Paulo, thank you so much. This has been amazing. I know I just used the website a couple of days ago and love the exercise handouts. So thank you again.
You're very welcome. And if anybody has any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to engage in a conversation.
And then just a comment from one of our members. So just a, thank you, Dr. O. Education is very important in our very small program. I look forward to checking out your website to find ways to better educate our programs.
Super.